Hello out there, this is Coach EJ, the brand.
And Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source.
Today's subject, Aaron, that we always like to talk about, the commitment of the athlete, also known as, are you all in?
And what does that really mean? And I think athletes really need to sit back, and parents too, because parents, you're investing time and money into this. And to me, all in means you're doing all of the things that you need to do to get to where you want to go. And I think athletes and parents sometimes they fool themselves into thinking that they're all in, and they're not. And it shows. And it shows up in the athlete's performance. And then they wonder, well, we did this, we did that, we did this, and we paid for this, we paid for that, we paid for this, but they didn't get any better.
Right.
And to illustrate my point,
Okay.
I'm going to do what I call athletic math. Okay?
Right.
And this is what I mean. You have athlete A.
Okay.
Okay? And he comes to you once a week for 6 weeks.
6 sessions.
You didn't let me ask my question.
I'm sorry, bud.
You killing me, man. You killing me.
Sorry, bro.
The question is that 6 weeks of training or is that 6 sessions? Now, most people interpret that as 6 weeks of training. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about, athletic math. All right? Sometimes we equate the passage of time incorrectly. So most people think if I've gone and seen this trainer or this coach or had this many practices over this period of time, they equate it to weeks of training. And that's a very bad trap to fall into, because you actually aren't getting in the volume of work that you need to get into. And so that is probably one of the biggest things that I see going on when people think they're all in. Okay? And the reason why I say that, and to illustrate my point,
Okay.
it basically takes about 6 weeks of full-time training to get an athlete through a process. You have a learning process, you have an adaptation process, and then you have an application process. And that can sometimes take even longer than 6 weeks, okay, of full-time training.
Okay.
And 6 weeks of full-time training, if you're a collegiate or a professional athlete,
Right.
just in general, that's 5 days a week.
Right.
So 6 weeks is 30 sessions.
Whoa.
Okay. So
Right.
do you see the
Yes.
difference there?
Yes.
So coming to someone or training or practicing once a week for 6 weeks is not the same as full-time training. You're talking 6 versus 30.
That's a big difference.
Huge difference. You're barely getting through phase 1 just doing those 6 sessions. So when you're talking about expectations from a development standpoint, when you're talking about expectations from a performance standpoint, you're still in the infancy of that whole process. And that's what parents have to realize and athletes have to realize, so that they have the right expectations, but more importantly, so that they plan accordingly from the beginning, so that they can set themselves up. Because if you say, hey, okay, I'm going to do this one thing once a week,
Right.
then understand that may take you 30 weeks. Okay? And 30 weeks, if you do the math, that's 7 months. You know?
That's over half a year, man.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so that's one of the big things that you have to understand is when you're saying, I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and I'm doing this.
Right.
Well, you might be busy each day of the week, which is fine. You may have a training with the trainer one day. You may have baseball practice or football practice 2 days out of the week, and then you have something else. But you've got to understand all of that requires a cumulative effect for it to be effective. And that takes time. And that passage of time will happen over a longer period if you're piecemealing it like that than a shorter period if you're condensing it.
Yeah, you're more consistent condensing it because the growth of your athleticism and your body development is just enhanced faster.
Right.
You know, and it's more consistent.
Right.
More consistent.
Right. So that's kind of what I call my athletic math.
Man, we talked about that. I'm sorry for jumping in on you like that, Aaron, but I, you knew where I was going with that one, man.
Yeah.
I go, man, that's just 6 sessions. Yeah. You know, you're right, and we see it because we see the performance of athletes we train.
Right.
You know, whether it's a player coming in trying to get a better 40 running time for football combine, or player drilling basketball a certain speed up and down the court, or a baseball player trying to run a 60. You know, right. I mean, parents, I tell you this out there, and anybody that's listening, you just can't come into somebody like an Aaron and say, hey, I got a showcase in 4 weeks, and I need you to, can we just set up 3 sessions? Help me with my mechanics, and that's going to help me. That's very difficult to get where you need to be in those short amount of time.
Right. Yeah. Anything basically when you're talking about acquiring skill or developing a body, it's like learning a new language.
Okay.
And you have to immerse yourself in it. And if you don't, it's going to take longer. It doesn't mean you're not going to get there.
Right.
But you have to now restructure your expectations and your timeline based on what you're actually doing. Okay. And they need to be in line and be more realistic. Now, another aspect of are you all in? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to do all of the things that it takes? And, I see a lot of athletes will get to a point where, okay, we've been doing some training, and you may have trained for 3 months, and now this season has started.
Gotcha.
Okay, and just to take baseball for an example, they'll have a high school season, but most importantly, they have a summer season. Yes. Because that's where a lot of the recruiting is going on. Same thing in softball and that sort of thing. Right. So they'll go through a preseason, then they'll get to the season, and they'll stop training.
Absolutely.
And I'll ask, well, why you stop training? Well, I had baseball practice. Or I had soccer practice, or I had this, I had track practice.
Right.
Well, what do you think happens during that 3-month or 2-month period where you have just games and practices? You detrain.
Right.
And now at the end of that season, you basically transition right into the summer season, which is your most important season in terms of recruitment.
Right.
Well, you've just detrained the last 8 weeks. How are you going to be ready for that? The only way you're going to be ready is if you do the things and you be all in. In other words, that means making those hard decisions and adjustments to continue your training. And it can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be with a trainer. It might be 30 minutes in the morning before you go to school.
Right.
It might be an hour after practice. That you continue to work on some of those things. It may be adjusting and doing things at home versus going to a gym.
Right.
But if you're all in, those are the things that need to be done. And that's what you do. And to use the season as an excuse
is not
an excuse. And it's not going to get you where you need to be.
Right.
So, again, I don't want athletes to take practice and games and competing as a substitute for training.
I love
They're two different things. Now, you're definitely going to learn things through the process of competing and playing and that sort of thing.
Of course you are.
But it's not necessarily going to give you the physical development that you may need to continue the process.
Can I tell you a story? Because this applies to me, and this was my early career as a 22-year-old player in professional baseball, going through the minor league system, trying to get to the big leagues. Is that first year when I was trained, Aaron, I trained during off season really hard, And when I got to the season, which was a 6-month season, 5.5 months, I broke down mentally and physically. My body got tired, then you mentally get tired. And I realized that though I prepared for the season, I was getting more tired during the season because I wasn't training. I wasn't allowing my base for training to improve. So thus, when I went into the off season after that first season, I had to work super hard just to get back to where I was when I started my first season. And what I learned is that I had to train during the baseball season. And I had to do those things like, okay, get to the ballpark early and do my weight training or do my agility or do my, fine skill things I needed to do to keep my body from breaking down, number one, in competition, and two, for sustaining that longevity of playing every day. And I tell athletes out there at any age, you have to train during your season in order to have the response and the results you would like to have, not only at the end of that season, but going into the next season.
So, guys, you got to be all in. And all in is just not showing up. It's just not writing a check. It's doing the things that you need to do on a regular basis. Not sometimes, but regular basis. And I think you guys will see the benefits when you're all in. And it may take some time, it might be grueling, but believe me, you'll look back and you won't even remember all the work that was put in. You'll remember it, but you'll appreciate it. And I think athletes need to really ask themselves that and take stock, and parents too. I mean, because this is an investment of time and money in your athletes. And, you might want to ask them every now and then, hey, how important is this to you? And then you can adjust your time and resources accordingly. But don't fool yourself into saying you're all in when you're not doing the things that put you all in.
All right, that wraps it up today. We're all in here as Coach EJ, the brand.
And Aaron Thigpen, the source. We're out.